Hello everybody. Yes, it's been rather a long time, hasn't it? Quite a lot has happened in the last 18 months since I last podcast with you. So there is an awful lot to talk about. But first I want to apologise. I didn't mean to leave such a long gap between podcasts, and it just kind of happened. There are a number of individual reasons why it happened, which cumulatively has meant that things have been a little bit on a back burner in terms of the YouTube channel, but I'm hoping that I'm coming back to this now with renewed vigour and energy, and I'll continue uploading frequent and regular podcasts for you. So welcome. My name is Gerard, or Peter, or Boniface, depending upon where I am in the country. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire, 7 miles south of the city of Oxford. And I live with my two cats, Toby and Bunty. And currently I am sitting in a place which is not my home. And I will talk more about the, not quite an elephant in the room, the elephant that is the room, further on in the podcast. So this is a podcast about my life and the fibre arts, and I think probably the best thing to do is to just talk about things that I'm working on at the moment. So I haven't been doing nearly as much work recently as I have done in the past, and there are good reasons for that, and it's partly tied up with the elephant in the room, but because of that, it's been a period of just occasionally picking something up, occasionally doing a little bit, and then moving on to something else, and filling in the small gaps in the day that I've had available. So what to talk about first? I think probably I'll talk about the thing that many of you will already have seen me start, because this has been on the hook an awful long time. This is my Downz Day Off cardigan. Oops, bring it out that side. Which is coming on nicely, but isn't coming on very quickly. It's a top-down raglan cardigan, and this is crocheted. So I've I start at the top, made the two front sides and the back at the top, and then put in this lovely 3-stripe sequence, and then I have worked down, increasing for the shoulders, and the raglan increases down the diagonal here, separated for the sleeves, and then I'm working back and forth around the bottom now. I've got to put another set of 3 stripes in yet, which I'll be doing in about 4 or 5 rows. And then it's just down to the bottom and add a button band and ribbing around, and then pick up all the stitches in the sleeve and work around those, putting in the extra stripes as well to match the main body. It is taking me an awful long time. The yarn I'm using, I wonder if I've got, I hope I do. No, that's not it. Let me see if I have a label in here. Yes, I do. I'll just put my glasses on because I can't see a thing without them, as you know. The yarn I'm using is the Katia Merino Fine. This is, I believe, 100%. Oh no, sorry. It is 52% wool and 48% acrylic. And the colour I'm using as the main colour is on here somewhere. Is just a dye lot, a colour 23. So yes, not particularly fascinating description of a colour, but it is colour number 23. This is, it's kind of, I suppose I'd call it a fingering or 4-ply yarn. And I'm using a 3.5mm hook for it. If I hide behind my It might just focus on there, you never know. Can you just see that? And this is my clover. I've been trying out different hooks. I have to be honest, not my favourite hook. I do like the feel of it, but because of the way I hold my hook and because I've got a man's hand and not a woman's hand, and therefore it's slightly bigger, it tends to dig into the palm of my hand just there as I'm working, and I find that can be a little bit annoying. I do prefer a longer hook. And the profile as well is very narrow. It's only just wider than a normal crochet hook. So again, it doesn't have that ergonomic comfort in the hand that perhaps other hooks have. But it's certainly not a deal breaker. It's a perfectly fine hook. I'm not sure I'll be using them a great deal other than testing this out. I do have larger hooks in the same series. And, you know, if I'm stuck for a hook, they'll be fine. It's just not going to, I don't think it's going to be my go-to hook. I do have at home, I don't have them here, I do have at home the names of the 3 colours. These are also in the Katia Merino Fine. But I just love the way the charcoal grey works against this mustard and this, well, it's almost an aqua. I don't know if you're getting the accurate colour there, because I am sitting in the shop at the moment and I have a fluorescent light there, but I also have natural sunlight coming in there, so I'm not sure and won't know until I edit the video at the end exactly whether or not the colour reproduction that I'm seeing on my phone screen is actually the colour reproduction that I'll be seeing on the computer screen once it's finished. But I do like this combination of colours, and I just think that's a very attractive combination. The pattern is an interweave pattern. I don't have the details of it here, but I think I do have. No, I don't have. Sorry, I just went to look into my phone. And of course, I'm recording on my phone. The phone is empty, so I can't check for you. But I will put on the screen once I've edited the video exactly what the pattern is. But it's Downz Day Off Cardigan, and it's an interweave pattern. I've been working on it for quite a while because, being a fingering weight and 4-ply and using a larger hook than perhaps the yarn would normally call for. Yes, I should actually talk about the yarn, the stitch pattern. Using a larger hook, but it's still a small hook with a fine yarn. There are something like, I think it's 292 stitches across each row, so it does take a long time just to complete one row. It's the kind of thing that I can watch, say, the Grocery Girls or Crochet Luna or any of the other podcasts that I watch, or a bit of Netflix binging or whatever it happens to be, or even listening to Audible, which I do a great deal now. It doesn't take a lot of concentration because it's a fairly mindless process. The stitch pattern, I don't know if yes, you might just be able to see it on the, it's a lovely, what's called a herringbone stitch pattern. Instead of doing a normal treble crochet or using American turns double crochet, you yarn over and put your hook into the stitch, and yarn over and pull the loop through, but then you immediately pull it through the first yarn over on the hook. You then chain one and then yarn over and pull through 2. So it gives a slightly, you get, on one row you're getting stitches going that way, and on the next row, because you've turned the fabric round, the stitches are going that way. So there is a right side and wrong side, but they both look the same. But obviously the right side will start going this way and the wrong side starts going that way. So I have a little stitch marker on the back that was made by one of my lovely friends in the crochet group that I belong to for a short period, and whom I now teach to knit, but I'll talk more about that further on. And she makes these lovely little stitch markers, and I really quite like that. And she also made these stitch markers, which are just little globes. I'll just move out of the way so it focuses a little, perhaps. But they're little globes full of sparkly, decorative, almost like opals. They give off different shades of green and blue as they sparkle, so they're really quite nice. It's always important, I find, to have nice things around you when you're trying to relax and enjoy yourself. And I keep it in this rinky-dinky little basket. The basket is made from elephant grass in Ghana and is dyed and woven by the women of the village in this particular case, and are then imported. I got this one from Tobs and Raw, and I have several of these baskets. I have another one here. I have a large shopping basket at home. I just love them. I love the beauty of them. I love the simplicity of them. I love the colours, and I also love the fact that being fair trade, the actual makers are benefiting directly from the sales of the items that they make, and so it's helping people to improve the quality of the life for themselves and their children, which is always a good thing. As a small business owner myself, I appreciate the importance of supporting other small businesses. So that's that. What else? Well, I suppose I could talk a little bit about the crochet group that I belong to. As you'll remember from 2 videos ago, which was 2 years ago, unfortunately, I had surgery, quite major surgery, abdominal surgery, which is completely fine. Everything's wonderful now, so there is no lingering problem. I have a hernia, but it doesn't hurt in any way, shape or form, so it's not a problem. Were it to hurt, I'd have had it seen to, because that's what the surgeon recommended, but it's never given me a day's problem. I just noticed that as I run my fingers down, there's a bulge and then it goes back in, so it's just a very odd. But even the scar tissue has repaired itself. Sorry, one of my neighbours just walked past and just waved at the window. So I had this surgery about 2 years ago, and as part of the recovery process, I'd come into Abingdon for a walk and to have a coffee. And I actually went to all of the local coffee shops in town and ended up spending most of the time that I was in Abingdon in Willow's Shake Shop. And you'll have heard me, I'm sure I've mentioned Willow's Shake Shop a couple of times, but it really became a daily part of my life, and very often coming in here was the first time I would actually speak to anybody, because I do have a flatmate, but he's a shift worker and also has a young family, so when he's not at work he often tends to be with his sons, which is perfectly fair enough. So I would very often not see him until the end of the day, which, you know, was also very nice, but it would mean that living alone and not being at work, you do tend to be in your own headspace quite a lot. So coming out to Willow's was a huge benefit to my mental well-being as much as my physical health. And they have, without exception, the best coffee in Abingdon. And I feel rather like the Remington chap, I can't remember his name, is it Charles something? Anyway, the Remington chap who famously in the advert, I love the shave so much I bought the company. Well, we'll come to that a little bit further on in this story. So Willow's is right next door to Mason's. Mason's is on the other side of this wall here. It's a very dangerous mixture, but it is. So in the rear room of Mason's on a Thursday morning, a lady used to teach a crochet class, and I didn't personally feel the need to learn techniques so much, but she asked me to come along a couple of times to just help out with if she was teaching a particularly tricky new stitch, I would go in and help her by teaching, because she had quite a large group. She couldn't necessarily get round to everybody to give them the one-to-one attention that some of them needed. Some of them were very experienced crafters who were just as much for the social as for the educational benefit coming to the group, but others were very new crocheters, very inexperienced and very lacking in confidence, and lacking in the sense of their own ability as well. So some of them would need their hand holding. And I just kind of became part of the group, and so then I started going to the group anyway because I enjoyed the social aspect. Well, the lady that runs the group left Masons, so she then had the group in her home up in North Abingdon, and I used to go along to that as well. So I honestly can't remember why I started telling that story. Oh yes, that was your stylist. Your stylist is one of the people who goes to Nikki's crochet class. And your stylist is originally from Cuba, but has been in the UK, I think, for about 12 or 13 years, and has a family here. She's a wonderful madcap creature. She really is. I love her to pieces because she's a force of nature. And she's just so positive about life and about everything that is going on in her life. You know, she's a no-nonsense doer of things. And she is a beautiful crocheter. Her talent is extraordinary. But again, she's one of these people who doesn't believe in herself necessarily in terms of what she creates. But because I ended up not being able to go to the crochet classes anymore, I wanted to build a little group of my own around knitting. I didn't want to compete with the crochet because A, I think there's a limited market, and B, I'm not keen on stepping on other people's toes and moving into their territory and that kind of thing. Plus, as well as the crochet group in North Abingdon, Mason still has a Tuesday and a Saturday crochet group, so I think crochet is quite well catered for. But knitting, there is no knitting group, teaching knitting group in the town. And so I started about a year ago now, May it was, so it's 11 months. I started a small knitting group, and I've had 6 people come to the group. 4 have remained constant through the time, including your stylist, who had learned to knit from one of the other ladies, so she knew the basic knitting stitch, but she didn't know anything else. And so we've been working together now for the best part of a year. We've made Christmas decorations. We're doing stranded colour work at the moment, which I know some of you out there will be thinking, oh my lord, what is he doing teaching stranded colour work within the first year? But my philosophy is none of these things are difficult. They're simply involved and require concentration, but the actual basic techniques are quite easily achievable. But people convince themselves that it's difficult, and so it becomes difficult, and people put obstacles up in their own way. That's how I've always felt whenever I've been teaching. I suppose being a mathematician, being a mathematics teacher, I know how often people would convince themselves that they didn't understand maths. It was too difficult, I can't do that. You know, it's just another language. It's just my brain doesn't work that way. I think that's complete bunkum. And I've always been able to communicate maths to people who have believed that they couldn't understand. I mean, sometimes things are beyond, and as a mathematician, some things are beyond my ken as well. I mean, I understand some of the principles involved in higher mathematics, but you know, I'm not an academic mathematician, and some of it is so abstract to be beyond my ken. But you know, the fundamentals are graspable, I believe, by anybody. And yeah, sorry about that. There was a bit of dust went up my nose. We're on a main road, and so we get a lot of buses and trucks go past on this road, so there is a lot of dust in this street. But anyway, neither here nor there. And it's just that time of year for hay fever, I'm afraid. So my belief is that the fundamentals of any subject are graspable, but that people get in their own way in terms of learning, and you just need to get in there before their brain tells them, actually, I can do this, but I can't do that because that is too complicated. And really, it isn't. You just need someone perhaps to encourage you and to tell you that you're doing the right thing as you're doing it, but that in the process in itself is actually not much more than what you previously been doing. A knit is still a knit, even if you do it in a different colour. It remains a knit stitch, for example. And the technique is just about making sure that your floats are not too long, that they're not too tight, but that they're not too loose, and that the stitches themselves don't lose their definition because they're pulling against each other. But that's like any knitting. Tension is something that comes to a knitter through experience of knitting. But the actual process of knitting is identical, with just a few little tweaks. Anyway, long story short, we are completing some Selbu mittens, which are the Norwegian star mittens in colour work. And everyone's finished their first one, which we did on double pointed needles, and now has started their second one, which we're working magic loop, because I wanted to give them the experience of two styles of the main two styles of circular knitting. And then they can choose which suits them best. I mean, I find that starting knitting in the round with DPNs is quite tricky, whereas starting it with magic loop is quite simple. But then I often find that I then want to transfer from the either interchangeables or circular needles onto the DPNs, because I find the constant pushing along and having to adjust your work actually slows down the process, and it's easier to knit using double pointed needles once you've actually got a little bit of fabric started. So having that understanding for themselves of what they find simple, what they find difficult, what they prefer, it's, you know, these things are very personal to every knitter. I rather like the crochet hook. You know, each person will have something that they prefer over something else. I mean, I don't like wooden needles particularly, but there are some wooden needles that I do like the Knit Pick Symphony, which I think are they're very highly lacquered, so that they are slick in the same way that metal needles are. I much prefer Zings over Chalgu. Though everybody else raves about Chalgu, I prefer Zings. I prefer Addies to Zings. Again, these things are very personal. I have used bamboo. It's not something I like to use, but I have used it. I find it very draggy. But if I was using mohair, then I would definitely use bamboo or silk, because they slip so easily off metal needles. So, you know, it's horses for courses, and what you prefer is personal to you as an individual. So I'm trying to give my knitters as wide an experience of the different techniques that are available to them and the different materials that are available to them, so that they can make informed decisions about what they want to do and how they want to do it and what they want to do it with. Because it's about providing the tools to enable them to go off and do whatever they want to do. It's not about always having to be there to show them this and to show them that. I mean, I enjoy doing that side of things, but ultimately the intention is that they will be accomplished knitters in their own right, and probably more so than I am. Because you don't have to be very good in order to teach, you just have to know what you're talking about. You know, the execution may not always be there, but the understanding is underpinning it. Anyway, so that's part of the long story. I think we'll get on to more work that I'm working on. I think it's probably about 18 months ago, I decided that I wanted to use a new yarn that had been brought out by West Yorkshire Spinners, which is their Croft. And this is, I think, let me just get my glasses because I don't want to speak out of turn. This is 100% Shetland Island wool. And it's an Aran yarn. So it's kind of heavy worsted, I suppose. If DK is light worsted and worsted is medium worsted, then Aran will be heavy worsted. It's a 12 ply yarn. This colorway is called Stony Breck, and it's a lovely kind of neutrally a beige color, I suppose, but it's got these flecks of russet and almost cobalt blue and this deep bottle green, and it's very attractive in the yarn there. And I'm knitting a jumper or a sweater with it, which is quite an investment in terms of the yarn itself, but also in terms of time. And I have completed the, let me get this right, this is the back. And so this is what it looks like when it's knit up. It just has this lovely speckly texture all the way across. So the back was, I completed a few weeks ago. Got quite a nice deep rib as well. It's got several inches of rib. I like a nice deep rib at the bottom. The top is currently held on a needle cable. This is one of my Addies, I think. Yes, I think it's an Addie click. Yes, it's an Addie click, so you just pop it in and it's attached. Because I need to pick up stitches once I finish the front, and then I will match stitch these together and then do the neck and then start on the arms. I've started the front. Now the back is just stocking stitch, but the front, oh dear, no. This is very poor. I always tell my knitters, do not put down your work in the middle of a row, and lo and behold, what have I done? But it's okay, because I can still show you. This is going to be the front, which has quite a lot of textured cable work on it. So there is a very simple cable on this side, which is just 4 stitches, 2 passed over in the same direction at every 4th row. This is a kind of traveling cable, which is over 6 stitches, and you cross over the first pair with the second pair, and then on row 1, and then the second pair with the third pair on row 3. And then the middle one is very textured, where there are 4 sets of 4 going across, and so every other row goes, the stitches are passed one way, and then the other row they're passed the other way, so you get this lovely crisscross effect. And then obviously the other side is just a repeat of this side with a nice stocking stitch panel at both ends. I'm about probably a third of the way up the back of the front now, so it's coming along. It's because it's a simple cable. It's only a 4-row repeat, so it doesn't require a huge amount of concentration. And every other row is just purl or knit, depending upon the stitch back. So there's no cabling involved at all. Every other row. So it's only 2 rows out of the 4 where there's a cable. And you'll notice that I use stitch markers, which show where I quite like these bejeweled owls. I just think they're very cute. So I know that I do stocking stitch up to the first stitch marker, and then I know that the first cable is over 4 stitches and the second cable is over 6 stitches, and then I get to the next stitch marker, which is, now this is why you shouldn't leave your work halfway through. The stitch marker's fallen off. But that's all right, I'll put it back on afterwards because I know it needs to go on that place. So the central panel will have 2 of these lovely sheep stitch markers, delimiting on either side, and then there's another bejeweled owl on that side. The stitch markers are Gloria Part-Train Knits, which I think is Canadian. I think she's Canadian. I'll put a link for you just so that you know who it is. But I love her stitch markers. I've got lots and lots of her stitch markers. I just think, yes, you can have the plain circular ones and they're fine, but I just like a little bit more. I quite like a little bit of razzle dazzle on my knitting. It just pleases me every time I have to pass them from one hook to the next, or one needle to the next, to have something a little bit more fanciful. Right. Anyway, what else am I working on? Well, I'll show you some finished objects as well, because I'll do those at the end after I've done the other two items I brought that I'm working on. I have 2 blankets at home that I'm currently working on, and I'll probably show them in the next couple of videos anyway. But I have, you know me, I like to have lots of things on the go. I know exactly where I'm up to in every single pattern that I'm working on. Or if I don't, I can very quickly read and find out where I'm. So I don't have a problem with remembering the different stitch patterns and getting back into the swing of things. I am a process knitter and crocheter. The product is nice to have, but it's not the reason necessarily why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's as much that I enjoy what I'm having to do in order to get the product at the end. So I'm very much driven by the process. I was reminded, because somebody asked me, you know, I think in the various different crafts that I've got going on at the moment, I've probably got as many as 15 different things that I'm currently working on. And for some people, that's panic-inducing to have. It's overwhelming to have that much that you've not finished, and you've got this project and you've got that project, and you know, it all just crowds in on the head. And I understand that, because it does to me sometimes, not very often, but you know, I've experienced that panic that, you know, oh, I've got to finish this, but I've got to finish that, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, and before you know where you are, your brain runs away with you, and you get nothing done. But a friend asked me, you know, how she should, because she's rather like me. She likes trying new techniques, and so she has a dozen. She didn't say exactly, but it was in that ballpark. Different projects on the go, and she's a great sock knitter. She loves knitting socks, and lots of different textured patterns as well. In fact, I think I'm right that she knits and crochets, but she only works in 4-ply yarn. She won't work in anything bigger, because she just likes having that. It's kind of like precision. It's not quite that, because you can get precision with larger, but it just feels more contained and more accurate and more regimented. And I think that just suits. She's a scientist by training, and I think that kind of suits her mentality to have that kind of fine work, which is excellent. You know, I understand that, and I do it myself. So I've worked with a 0.5 millimeter hook before now, so it's to make some filet crochet, which lace work. So I do understand why she's like that. But she was saying that she was finding it difficult because she had so many things that she wanted to get finished, and other things that she'd kind of just fallen out of love with, but she'd like to finish because she'd spent the time and the money on the yarn and all that kind of thing. And we were chatting about this, and I just said, well, you know, when I used to have students, and when I was a student myself, my revision technique, because there's so much to revise at the end of 2 years, 3 years, whatever period that your exams are covering, that you can easily get overwhelmed by how much you've got to revise before the exams. And obviously you do your, to some extent, a revision plan, because you don't necessarily want to be revising everything for the final exam before the first exam, but you don't necessarily have a lot of time within the exams to be able to then dedicate time to the final paper as much as you'd like. And so I said my technique was always to just have a pile of the top half dozen things that needed to be done, and then work on them for 90 minutes to 2 hours. And that was it. They then went to the bottom of the pile. You then picked up the next thing on the top of the pile and you worked on that for 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever. And then that went to the bottom of the pile. And then as something is completed, as you finish what you need to do, or the exam's happened, or whatever it is, then the next item comes in, but it goes to the bottom of the pile because it's taking the place of the thing you've just finished working on. And then you're constantly refreshing your pile of work, but you're never spending... It's not a case of, oh, I've got to pick that thing up and start doing another 5 hours on that, or whatever. It just keeps your mind a little bit fresher. And she has found that she's finished 2 sweaters since I suggested that might be a way to get some of her unfinished objects off the needles. So maybe that would be of help to other people as well. This is a revision technique that I was given, well, I'm 51 now, so 35 years ago. So it's not anything new. I'm not reinventing the wheel and suddenly discovering, that we've been doing oblong wheels when we should have been doing circles. It's just, this is a technique that I think is transferable into the crafting world as well, because we all have those projects that we really, it'd be nice to have it, but really I can't face doing that, Not because you don't love the item, but because you just don't love the process of getting the item finished. We've all been there, we've all got those projects. It's just a way perhaps of powering through them, that you just get them done by doing a little bit and often, and then moving on, doing a little bit and often, and moving on, and just keep it going in a nice refreshing cycle. Excuse me while I have a drink of water. Anyway, so I've got another project. It's almost self-justifying, but this is in my Mrs. Brown's bag. This, I think, is Eric, is the pattern, because this is named after Eric Lutz of Stick Plus Twine podcast, who also, I think, was involved in the Rib magazine, which sadly didn't last forever, but it was good while it lasted. And I'm knitting, would you believe, very appropriately, I guess, a pair of Georgia socks, which is a very simple fan and lace pattern, really, and the rest is just stocking stitch. It's an afterthought heel, so I've marked where the heel's going to go. These are shorty socks. The yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners again. This is their signature 4-ply, and the colourway is 874, but it doesn't have any colour name. It's a 75% wool, 25% nylon, and contains at least 35% blue-faced Leicester, as it says there. So it's really soft, worked up. It's really soft. It's not scratchy at all, but it feels in the ball. It feels quite strong and crunchy. So I think it's probably got the best of both worlds of having that strength that the blue-faced Leicester gives it, but also having the softness that a superwash would give. So it doesn't say what the other 40% of the wool is, so I'm guessing it's just a blend of different wool. So this is my Georgia sock. As I say, this is Tracy from the Grocery Girls pattern. It's available on Ravelry. This is only the first one, but again, using stitch markers to... Not quite sure what the stitch markers are there for, actually. I know what the second one's there for. I don't know what the first one is for. Oh, yes, I do. Yes. No, sorry. The first one is the beginning of round. Oh, yes. So that's why I've stopped in the middle of a round, but it's constant knitting round. It's only a short circular. So this is, again, is the third way that I've not yet shown my knitters, which is knitting with very short needles. And needless to say, I'm knitting the right way around, so then using the long needle to take off the short needle. And it's a very quick knit. I just need to crack on and get some more done. They're plastic needles, which they're okay. I wouldn't say anything more than that. They're just okay. But I'm loving the way that the stock yarn itself is knitting up into these stripes. But not complete stripes. You can see that there is a resurgence of there's a line of the new color, and then the old color comes back, and then there's the new color again in the full stripe, and then it starts having the next color coming in, and it just breaks up that pristine striping and gives it sorry about that, my camera cut off I've just realized while I was talking. I carried on into the next subject, and it had cut off before I'd finished what I was talking about. So yes, the patterning, it reminds me of perhaps some seaside chalets, wooden chalets that have been painted and that the paint is slightly peeling. It also has that look of deck chair material, so it's got quite a nice kind of weather-beaten vibe going on for me. So yes, just to finish off what I was talking about with the two stitch markers, my two lovely steel owls, again from Gloria Patre Knits. The first one is the beginning of round marker, and the second one is just the beginning of the fan section, just so that I don't end up knitting too far, and I should actually be doing the very limited pattern of yarn overs and the like. So the final piece that I'm currently working on is in this lovely bag, which I bought a year ago, just over a year ago now, at Unravel, which is a wool show in, well, it's at the Maltings in Farnham. I went this year as well with Joe and Rachel, who I went with last year. I was very good this year. I didn't buy any wool whatsoever, which, I mean, shock horror. I did buy a couple of other things that I'll show you in the next episode, but this I got. This is actually from California. It is an Attenti bag. As you can see, the label is on the inside here. If I move that out of the way, you'll be able to see the label better. Sorry, it's quite there we are, that's better, you can see it now. So this is an Attenti bag. It would have been easy just to hold this up because I've left the label on. And not the cheapest bag I've ever bought, but it is beautifully made. It's got 4 lovely pockets on the outside, 4 items if I need to put them in there, and 4 pockets on the inside. It has this lovely suede effect material, which just feels fantastic, and quite a strong canvas interior. So it's quite robust, I think, and it certainly withstood the ministrations of my 2 cats. But the pattern the item I'm working on that's in here is the River Rocks scarf from Rib, the first edition of Rib magazine, which was Patina, I think. That's the rather attractive looking scarf on there, which is brioche. I took a brioche class last year, just after Unravel, in fact. Again, with Rachel at the Oxford Yarn store, which is in Oxford, as the name would suggest. It's in North Parade Avenue, just to the north of the centre of Oxford. And they're a Rowan retailer, so that they tend to be slightly... Masons will cater to a lot of different levels of clientele, whereas the Oxford Yarn store tends to be catering to a slightly higher cost customer. And I've made a start on the brioche, which I found to be, when I read the pattern, I was thinking, oh my lord. But having taken the class, which was a very good class, oh dear, I've got an extra loop somehow in there. That's not good. But I can easily tink that back, so that's not a problem. Because one of the things I did when I was taking the class is it was a very well constructed class. We initially worked on single colour brioche just to get used to the slip-on yarn over technique and then barking and burping. Those of you who understand brioche will understand what I mean. A brioche knit or a brioche purl, so that's BRK, BRP, I usually refer to as barks and burps. So I wasn't having some kind of mental derangement episode there. So we started them in the morning doing single colour. So when we finished that and we're having a chat and a drink, I unpicked everything that I'd just done, because one of the problems I think that we all face as knitters is that we get into a state of mind where we're absolutely terrified of making a mistake because we've absolutely no idea how to put the mistakes right. And so because brioche is such an unusual stitch pattern in terms of normal tinking with the yarn overs, I just thought it was simpler to get it into my head. This is how you undo the work. So, and we did the 2-colour brioche in the afternoon, and I did the same thing at the end of that session as well. So I actually have nothing to show for the session I attended, but I just felt that you get some idea of the construction of an item going forwards. I think you get, sorry, I've got lots of cat hairs on here. I think you get a lot more idea about the construction when you undo what you've just done. So this is where I'm up to. I'm absolutely loving it. I used a 2-colour Italian cast on at the bottom, which isn't perfect, but it's good enough that it's not going to draw attention to itself. As you can see, I've got this extra loop up here, which I'm not sure where that's come from, so I just have to tink back 2 rows, which is fine. It's a reversible fabric, but of course the reverse is the same thing but in different colours. It's not quite the same thing because rather cleverly the designer of this scarf, which is Anka Mustia, rather cleverly the lighter shade is on the wrong side of the fabric. The right side of the fabric is this side where you actually see the separations. This is more normally the right side of the fabric because you want this kind of tree bark effect. But the effect it gives you on the wrong side, because you don't have them joining each other, is you do get much more the sense of rivulets of water running past stones, which is the name of the scarf, is River Rocks. And I think you do get that sense where they just end and start of the little eddies around obstructions in the water. So it's quite clever the way that the fact that it's not fully reversible once you do the increases or decreases has been utilised as part of the design. The yarns that I'm using are both Rowan, and they are the Alpaca Soft DK. These are they. And I'll just tell you what they are. If I can find, I might be able to find one of the used bands in here because it's difficult to, no, I've obviously not kept the bands. Let's have a look. Yep, there we are. It's 70% virgin wool and 30% alpaca. It's incredibly soft. It's not as flimsy and soft as 100% alpaca would be. Even though it's only a scarf, I do think it needs to have some strength in the structure, otherwise it will just pull out and just not look as good as it could. So I'm quite happy that it's not 100% alpaca, even though that would be incredibly soft. This is still very, very soft. I'm just looking to see if I can see a colourway on it or whether it's just another number. I don't see anything there. Yes, well, I'm sorry about that. I had a few little issues surrounding the camera. I've hopefully, fingers crossed, got things sorted out in such a way that I can actually finish this video for you now. So I was just telling you the colorways of the two Rowan yarns that I'm using. Unfortunately, they don't have a name. So we have, where's it gone now? I always lose it just as I find it. Have you noticed? So we have colour 217, which is this lovely teal colour. And then the lovely kind of chocolatey brown one is 204. And as I say, that's the Rowan Alpaca Soft DK. I'm using 4.5mm needles on that because I think the brioche needs a little bit more looseness, and I'm quite a tight knitter. I would normally use a 4mm needle for a DK, but on this occasion I thought the 4.5 was the right way to go. So that's those. So that's all of my whips and so on. Just fingers crossed now that the video continues to work. So I'll talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, the elephant that is the room. You may be aware by now, some of you will be following me on Instagram, that I started working in the shake shop. I left Oxford Bus Company at the end of the September in 2018, having completed about 18 years there. So that was quite a big change in life. And I decided I had recovered by then from the surgery, but it takes a lot longer than just the physical recovery. You know, there's a lot going on that you need to get over and move on with before you can feel 100% again. And Jeanette and Terry, who were the owners of Willows, needed some help with the shop, particularly over Christmas, because they were finally going to have a week off and have a Christmas holiday. They went actually for a cruise around the Caribbean, which they loved, completely by the by. So I started working a few part-time hours for them whilst I was just... There are a couple of other projects that I had on the go, that I still have on the go, that haven't yet come to full fruition, but which will over the next few months, so I will be able to talk about those more as they happen. And then in the new year, I stayed on. I worked every day because their daughter changed school, and it just suited them to have someone here at the end of each day so that they could be with their daughter, who is a budding gymnast and so required an awful lot of extra events outside of school that they had to take her to. And eventually they decided over the spring and early summer that they were going to sell the shop. Now, my friend Mike, who makes these beautiful wire art creations, batteries have died on that one. He makes these beautiful trees, some of which light up, some of which don't, and various other... I think if I move the camera sideways, you can see the beautiful willow tree, just over here. He made that as well, and he makes lots of things. He makes spiders and scorpions and pictures and various other bits and pieces. He was looking for a retail base, and so I mentioned to him the possibility of us jointly buying the shop, and we thought it over and we did our basic due diligence, and on August the 1st we bought Willow Shake Shop and took over the running of the shop from Jeanette and Terry. They've done a fantastic job building up this business. They created a little community here which is very much craft centric, and you'll notice there's a lot of little items for sale. A lot of these are made by local makers. I mean, this beautiful little duffel bag, for example, which is just the most adorable little knit stripy bag with a drawstring top, and it's just lovely. This is made by one of our newer makers, Anne. But we also have these lovely zippered pouches, which are actually ideal. I've used them, and a friend of mine my friend Rachel, who knits a lot of socks, use them as sock sacks, because they will hold 100 grams and your needles and your sock quite comfortably. So they're really nice little bags and lots of different designs, and these are made by Jill. And she also makes the polymer clay pendants and necklaces that we have on sale. So there's lots of different makers who make things that we sell in the shop. And I made a few hats, which I think you can see over on the display behind me, behind my right shoulder here. And I'll take you through some of the things over the next few videos, over the next few months. So since August, we've been, well, anyone who runs their own business knows it's an awful lot of work. It's not just the time you actually spend in the shop, it's also the time around the business, ensuring you have the right stock, making plans, sorting out accounts, all that kind of thing. All that needs to be done on an ongoing basis, ensuring you've got enough staff and that you properly train them. We're very fortunate. Since we took over the business, we've had one member of staff move on because she wanted to focus on work that was more related to what she wanted her career to be, which I think is perfectly fair enough. But we've had a very stable group. Jeanette and Terry made the decision, which we've carried on, that as a large part of our demographic is young people, that people who worked here after school in particular, we do an hour and a half after school finishes every day, are themselves 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are still in education within the town. And I think it's something that I know from my time at the bus company. Businesses always have a better rapport with their client base if their client base looks at the company and sees people like them there. And one of the beautiful things about this place, as well as the craft community that has built up here, is the fact that this has become a place where teenagers can come and they're allowed to congregate, they're allowed to spend time with their friends and socialise and do all the things that we as adults take for granted. And there are lots of places where they're simply not allowed to come into the shop in more than one at a time. So, you know, there's a real, and you do get the occasional boisterousness, but it is very occasional and it's handled. You just say, you know, come on, calm down, and they do. So it's not the end of the world. So we have, it's a really nice business. We have a group of ladies who come regularly in the mornings for their morning coffee. We have young mothers or mothers of young children who come in the middle of the day, and then we get a lot of school children and teenagers in the afternoon, and then at the weekends we get a lot of families. So it's really nice mix of customers. We're quite a small establishment. We have we've increased the number of covers that we can manage, which we're up to about 15. So it is quite a bijou establishment, but a large part of our clientele is takeaway anyway. And we've done a lot, Jeanette and Terry have done a lot before us, and we've continued to reduce the environmental impact of takeaway. So we use a lot less plastic, we're using a lot more card and paper, which has gone down extremely well, and encouraging people to bring reusable items so that we can put their drinks into reusable cups and so on. There is a limit to what we can actually do, but we're keen to make sure that we're doing as much as we can do at the same time, because, you know, we're all aware of the impact that everything we do has on the environment. Use of resources not to take care of the planet that we live on. Sorry, my phone just flashed something at me, but it seems to be working still, so that's okay. So that's basically where we are. So this is Willow Shake Shop, and I am one of the two proud proprietors here now. Clearly, COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the business. We were closed for a month until this last week, partly because, unfortunately, I think I probably had the virus, I had most of the symptoms that have been described, and it was really unpleasant for a period. But I seem to be fully over it, apart from a little bit of nasaliness, but that will go. And as I say, it's now hay fever season, so I can't even tell if the nasaliness is due to hay fever or is due to the remnants of whatever I had a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, testing here has not progressed to the point where I can have a test to see whether or not it was, so I'm having to continue to behave as if I've not had it, but I'm fairly confident that I have. So we reopened the shop on Monday. The government provided emergency legislation to allow businesses like mine to slightly repurpose our shops so that we could do collection and delivery services. So we've now converted in, we don't allow people to sit down. Normally the tables that are against the walls here would be scattered around the room with chairs and people would sit. We've now repurposed part of it for preparation of food, and the rest of it is the collection point, and also a physical barrier to show that, you know, it's not business as usual. You can't come into the shop. There's just a small area at the front where they can come in to pick up what they need and then go. People call us in advance, make their order, and we give them an allocated time to come and collect it, and they come and collect it at that time. And broadly speaking, that's working. We're not taking orders from the street generally, because we can't have a queue of people building up outside. It's just, it's problematical because you don't want to turn people away from the shop, but at the same time we have to protect everybody, not just myself and Mike, but the other people that we're serving and providing the service to. So I think we have to be quite firm, and most people have responded positively to that. They've acknowledged, and I think people generally have acknowledged, that the restrictions that are in place for a very good reason. You know, this is a very serious public health issue globally, not just nationally or even locally. The reality is that there are some people who will be very vulnerable to the effects of this highly contagious illness. And it's not a matter of charity. We're not staying at home because we're being nice to other people. It's actually a matter of justice. If you can change your life in such a way that you will not pass on a potentially terminal illness to another person, or a fatal illness to another person, then in justice, you should not do that thing. You can't live your life, well, it's not my problem if they get ill because of something I did. Yes, it is. You have the power within you to prevent that. So we're all going through a very difficult time. Financial concerns that we all have, because even though we've reopened the shop, we've seen a significant fall in our business over the last month. Other people are in fear of losing their jobs. People are in fear of losing their homes. There's the whole problem of domestic abuse, on top of which is just the reality that you can really love the people that you live with, but spending every waking hour with them is going to lead to tensions in the home. It just is. That's just the way we are. Unfortunately, that will happen. And all the concerns that we all have about loved ones who might be vulnerable and friends that we might be missing and that kind of thing, that they're all adding up to producing a lot of worry and concern. But at the same time, there are people who are stepping up to the plate, as it were, and are providing vital services, not just the frontline healthcare workers who are doing a heroic job, but people who work in supermarkets, people who drive buses, people who deliver packages and mail, people who collect our refuse. These are essential services, and people are putting themselves and their families to some extent at risk, going out and continuing to keep society functioning at the basic level that it needs to continue. And so, on top of that, you've got the tremendous fundraising activities of people like Captain Tom, in the UK who has raised over £25 million for NHS support charities. And that's not for the NHS itself, it's for the people who, it's to support the people who work in the NHS and to provide them with proper equipment and any benevolence payments that they might need to help them with transport costs and that kind of thing. And then we have, you know, the understanding from those of us who provide entertainment on YouTube or whose careers and lifestyles are all about entertainment, that it's at this point that we have to give something back to those who have supported us in the past. And, you know, we have these little armchair chats about things that interest us. And I've noticed a lot of my favourite podcasters have significantly increased their output, partly because they have the time to do it, yes, certainly, but partly also because there is a sense of, you know, I can just give you an hour's escape from whatever situation you find yourself in at home and give you a laugh and a joke and you know, something nice to look at or something to ponder later. So I think, you know, we're all trying to do our bit to support each other through this, and we will get through this. And, you know, the intention is that we'll get through this and get out the other side, and that we won't sacrifice. Anyway, yes, sorry. It's a very personal thing because my mother has a dementia and a heart condition, and so is one of the very vulnerable people. And if she were to get this, if she had what I had, I know that she would, there's a strong possibility she would not. Anyway, through, sorry, something keeps flashing up on the screen. I don't know what it is. As soon as I put the glasses on, it fades off again. So there we are. Right, so I have two finished objects for you. Now, they're both Tunisian crochet. And a year ago, it was February last year, I think it was, February 2019, I taught a workshop in here while it was under the previous ownership on Tunisian crochet, and a number of ladies who were in my crochet class came along to the one that I attended, not the one I gave, came along to that, and we made, over the 2 weeks, these headbands, which I think, this is just using the Tunisian simple stitch, and my purpose with making the headband was to teach them how to increase and decrease. This is self-striping yarn, so I didn't actually have to change colours, although I did. I mean, changing colour is not difficult when you're doing Tunisian crochet. So this is a kind of ear warmer headband. I have a rather large head, so it won't fit me. I would try to put it on for you, but oh, there we go. So you see, you could wear this under a hood in the winter, and it would just keep your ears toasty and warm. And some of the ladies made several of these, so that was quite nice. Everybody went home with one. They picked it up quite quickly. We had some fun in teaching it. So having made this, and my point to them was that the increases and decreases that we did, because we started at one end of this, went all the way around, and then stitched the two together at the end. So you increase out at one side and then you decrease back down to the point on this side. But those increases and decreases are exactly the same as the increases and decreases that are needed to do shaping for a jumper, for example. So I decided to put my money where my mouth was, and I made this, which is a Tunisian crochet tank top. This uses the Tunisian simple stitch, which is this stitch here with the vertical bars, and then a panel of Tunisian knit stitch, which looks just like the knit stitch. And it gives that different texture going up. I quite like the yarn. It's a little bit brighter than I intended it to be. I didn't really think it through, if truth be told. I mean, I love the colours, and I have worn it several times, so it's not that I'm bothered by that, but it is kind of like a camouflage top, which wasn't my intention when I first made it. And obviously I had to cast off some of the stitches here, and then we did some decreases up here at the top and sewn everything together with using the mattress stitch. And then I did a normal double crochet, US term single crochet around the armholes and around the neck hole. Well, that's my Knitters and Crochets Guild badge. I will talk about those in another episode. And then at the bottom of the whole thing, I did knit. I picked up stitches and then decided to knit a ribbing. Now, there is a problem with the ribbing, which is that I used the wrong size needle. I used the same size needle as the top, which means that the ribbing isn't actually pulling in the way I'd like it to. So I will, in fact, rip this out and put a new ribbing on. It won't take very long. It didn't take very long the last time. But so those are my two finished objects. I actually wore that to Unravel this year, and several people commented on the fact and knew that it was Tunisian crochet and were very pleased that I was doing Tunisian crochet. So that was all good fun. I'm just going to have some more water. So I have a couple of acquisitions. These are not, well, most of them are not new, but one of them is. So I'll talk about the one that's new first. And that is this book, which is Harry Potter Knitting Magic. And this is a book of patterns for all, well, not all things, but everything in here is Harry Potter related. It's the official Harry Potter knitting pattern book, it says there, and it's by Tanis Gray. It's a very nice book. It has a lot of different types of patterns. So some of the patterns, for example, at the beginning of the books, are the magical creatures in Harry, not in Harry Potter and the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them series, rather. So those are the Cornish pixies, for example, and that's Fluffy the three-headed dog. So these are not items that appeared in the films, is the point. But then you go further into it, and the Wizarding Wardrobe. So there are patterns for the different house scarves. Obviously that's Gryffindor being gold and red. And then there are the jumpers made by Molly with the initial letter of each of the recipients' names on. And so they give you charts for each of the letters of the alphabet, which is quite nice. And the thing that, oh, well, I mean, there's this lovely Hermione's cardigan, again with the house colours around the bottom of the cardigan, which is very nice. The one that really tickles me, you may remember Professor Umbridge in the Deathly Hallows movie. She is in the Wizengamot courtroom interrogating a muggle-born witch. Those of you who know Harry Potter know what I'm talking about. And Professor Umbridge is a despicable, bureaucratic witch, in both senses of that word. But she also, at one and the same time, she has this dastardly character, but this saccharinely sweet persona of pink and cats and kittens and tea. That's a complete aside. In that scene, she is wearing this cat stole. And this just about sums up her character. She is that sickly saccharinely. But I actually really quite like the cat stole, so I might make one of those. But the thing I'm actually going to make is not something... I mean, it did appear in the film, but it appeared in the film in a number of different ways. And in the second film, The Chamber of Secrets, Snape and Professor Gilderoy Lockhart, how can you forget a name like that, start a dueling club to teach the youngsters how to cast spells against each other. I mean, I never really understood the point of the dueling club, because it seemed to be teaching them how to kill each other ultimately, or at least severely injure each other. But I mean, Hogwarts was never a school that I think children went to because health and safety was the top priority of the head teacher. Let's put it that way. And if it had been, it would have been a very boring series of books and films. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And yes, I'm sorry. I do still brush my. I shouldn't put my hand to my face. I keep doing it. I do wash my hands regularly. I have a huge bottle of alcohol hand gel here, which I use regularly throughout the day, but I really need to stop putting my hands to my face. I'm aware that I do it, and it annoys me that I can't stop myself before I've done it, but there we are. I will try and be better. Anyway, Lockhart and Snape start this dueling club, and they do it on this platform table which runs the length of the hall, and there are these kind of crescent moon and full moon decorations going along it, and they wear these leather gloves as kind of dueling, you know, the costume for dueling. Well, the pattern that has been put in here is a combination of the two, so it's the dueling gloves but with the design that was on the platform on which they were dueling each other, and it's these, which I just think are spectacular. So they're fingerless mitts that go halfway up the arm, and I know somebody who would love a pair of these for Christmas, so I'm hoping to make them for Christmas. They do have a sensitivity to animal fibres, so I can't use wool, so I've decided to make them in cotton. This is a 4-ply cotton by Stylecraft. It's just 100% cotton. The shade is lapis, which I think you can agree that is very much a lapis shade. I have the golden seed, which I will be, sorry, I now know what the message is. It's just telling me that the 10-minute file size has been reached and it's carrying on recording. I don't know whether there'll be jumps in this, but if there are, there are. And I will try and work out a better system for the next episode. But the only thing wrong with this, and there's nothing wrong, it's a fairly simple, it's just a garter stitch pattern, picking up the beads according to a chart. Unfortunately, all 1,600 beads have got to be thread onto here, so it's 800 on each one, basically. Because I think I'll probably do them 2 at a time as well. You don't get second sock syndrome, as it were, when you do 2 at a time. And it would be quite easy to do 2 at a time, because they're basically garter stitch tubes, I think. I've not fully gone into that, but my problem at the moment is I need to get myself a wire needle in order to get the beads onto the yarn. And of course I can't go to the craft shops because the craft shops are closed. So I'm working on sorting out getting that so that I can thread the 1,600 beads onto that. Right, I'm sorry about that. Yes, I'm going to have to stop the video there because I think I've discovered what's wrong. My SD card doesn't seem to be working inside the phone, and so it's running out of space, and that's why it keeps stopping. So I've talked about almost everything, in fact, that I wanted to talk about. I'll be talking about everything around me, a lot more in future episodes, and some other stuff that I've got. So until then, stay happy, stay well, stay safe, and keep crafting. So bye for now.